Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you could join us. Belize Prime Minister tests positive for coronavirus. This story takes the lead in our 993rd edition of Caribbean Perspective for Wednesday, 25th November 2020. Details after this important message.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. John Briceño, Prime Minister Belize, was recently swabbed for COVID-19 and has tested positive. More in this News 5 Belize news item with Melanie Cuellar.
The coronavirus has reached the top levels of government. The Office of the Prime Minister has confirmed that PM Briceño has tested positive for COVID-19. Briceño was swabbed today in Belize City and the results came back positive. He is asymptomatic. Since taking office, the PM has been moving around establishing his government, and in the past few days, he visited flooded areas in the northern parts of the country. The Prime Minister will be spending 2 weeks in isolation, and since the work continues, Tuesday's cabinet meeting will be held virtually. His Chief of Staff and Cabinet Secretary Stuart Leslie has also tested positive and is showing minor symptoms. Test results have come back negative for Briceño's family. Since the November 11th elections, Jorge Melina Spat from Cayo West and Mike Spat from Toledo East have also tested positive. Those persons, including cabinet members who have been in close contact with the Prime Minister, will also be swabbed. Marlene Cuellar.
Health officials in Guyana to decide on continuing the use of remdesivir. Gordon Mosley of News Source Guyana reports.
Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony, while acknowledging the latest recommendation against the use of remdesivir to treat coronavirus patients, indicated today that Guyana is still to decide on discontinuing the use of the drug. In a statement 3 days ago, the World Health Organization issued a conditional recommendation against the use of remdesivir in hospitalized patients, regardless of the severity of the disease. The WHO said there is currently no evidence that remdesivir improves survival and other outcomes in these patients. According to the World Health Organization, its recommendation is part of a living guideline on clinical care for COVID-19 that was developed by an international guideline development group, which includes 28 clinical care experts, 4 patient partners, and 1 ethicist. Guyana has been using remdesivir to treat critically ill coronavirus patients. While the Health Ministry has reported on the use of the drug, it has never provided additional details on its success or failure in the treatment of the patient. In his update today, the Health Minister told DPI that a local health guideline group will have to meet and decide on the WHO's recommendations to not use the drug.
So it is for countries to decide what it is that they will put in their guidelines. A lot of clinicians still believe that there's a role for remdesivir within a subset of patients, while others probably think that you should discontinue it. We have a local guidelines committee dealing with the treatment of COVID patients, and they would make those decisions as to whether we continue to use remdesivir or not.
The World Health Organization has said that the data used for its recommendation was reviewed by an international panel and included results from the trial, as well as 3 other randomized controlled trials. It noted that in all, data from over 7,000 patients across the 4 trials were considered before the recommendation was made. Guyana has been using remdesivir since early September and has even received donations of the drug in addition to procuring doses from India. The country recorded its deadliest months for COVID-19 in September and October.
Julian Williams of Grenada has been stuck in Tobago since February due to the closure of Trinidad and Tobago's borders. Ms. Williams spoke with TV6's Elizabeth Williams, who filed this report.
Julianne Williams was visibly distraught, so much so that she was brought to tears as she told us of her plight, explaining that all she wants to do is return home to Grenada. Stranded in this country since February, she told TV6 she was on vacation in Tobago when the borders closed due to COVID-19. Miss Williams said after applying through the Ministry of National Security, she received an exemption in August to depart this country and booked her ticket via Caribbean Airlines. However, she said when she journeyed to the A&R Robinson International Airport on November 1st, she was informed by airline staff that her flight was cancelled.
On the 1st of November.
And what they told you?
They told me that they don't see no flight there for me to get out and how I come by the ticket and it's not giving me the runaround.
Miss Williams has since lost her job in Grenada and all she wants is to go home.
I want to go home because I lost my job, I lost my little shop, the government moved it. And I'm just like, I don't hear nothing, I want to go home.
Since there are no flights to Grenada at this time, she has no other choice but to hope something works out sooner rather than later. She is being helped by Good Samaritans in Tobago who are accommodating her.
I can leave my house halfway open, everything is fine with me right now. I want to go home.
Okay, what did Caribbean Airlines tell you in terms of when is the next available flight?
They tell me they don't know as yet when it will be a next flight to go to Grenada. So just hold on and listen to the radio and they'll get to me.
Officials at Caribbean Airlines told TV6 there are no flights from this country to Grenada now. We were also told that Miss Williams should keep checking Caribbean Airlines' social media platforms for further information should a flight open up between Barbados and Grenada. Elizabeth Williams, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
None is better than the other. That's the view of Ministry of Health concerning two parties which took place over the weekend, one in Kelly Village, Caroni, and the other in Valsaine. But are there any COVID-19 ramifications, and is anyone going to be quarantined? TV6 provide the answers to this story by Alicia Boucher.
As much as the Valsaine wedding over the weekend, where scores of people were in attendance, was dubbed a fantasy, in terms of COVID-19 and potential risk, it was no better than the Zaza party where 250 persons were detained. So says Technical Director of the Epidemiology Division at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Avery Hines.
There is no distinction between one type of gathering and another with regard to the COVID-19 risk. The virus does not discriminate between one setting and another if protocols are not followed.
Those protocols include mask wearing, social distancing, weddings, funerals, and wakes limited to 25 people, and public gatherings of no more than 10. Dr. Hines says failure to comply means a possible further spread of the virus.
And it is for this reason that the Prime Minister, for example, would have indicated the request for office gatherings and those sorts of normal Christmas events to be foregone as a step in the direction of reducing the bringing of different webs into contact.
Whether or not such a scenario would arise based on the two events, only time would tell.
Because of the high risk that we would have seen in those two events over the weekend, do you think that we perhaps need to add some measure of quarantine?
The quarantine of an individual or a group is a legal process that is initiated by identification of specific risk of exposure. Now, this is different from identification of potential risk of exposure because of where a person may or may not have been. We cannot implement or initiate quarantine just based on an individual's location in a gathering or not.
Dr. Hines says the process of contact tracing based on persons who would have tested positive for the virus is what would be used to initiate possible quarantine.
We go to work, we take taxis, and at any point, anyone could have been exposed. We can't go on could have. We need to work with an actual confirmed case that we then trace back to a given exposure setting.
And given this, as it stands, those involved can go about their daily routine. Alicia Boucher, TV6 News.
Young women in Antigua are underscoring the importance of gender parity in the workplace and particularly in the political arena. ABS's Jessica Russell reports.
Today, we indicate that the young women of Antigua and Barbuda are not afraid to become leaders. We are taking up space and we are truly shaping the future as female.
The Young Women in Leadership program, launched in September, is a partnership between Caribbean Women in Leadership, PAL Americas, and the Parliament of Antigua and Barbuda. YWOL seeks to build knowledge, skill, and create networking opportunities for its participants. The training culminated in the special parliamentary session Monday.
Differentiating between men and women has become second nature, relegating women to a position of subordination and discrimination and wasting the enormous potential of about half of the world's population.
The youth MP sought to address that challenge and a number of other issues facing women through the finance variation of Appropriation Bill 2020.
Moving to reallocate funds to deserving ministries where many women are employed and are able to demonstrate their aptitude in the field and clearly show that their productivity and capability is on par and often supersede that of their male counterparts can be seen as a pivotal move in the right direction.
Under the watchful eyes of the nation's current politicians and government officials, the bill was read 3 times and passed.
I think the ayes have it. This House stands adjourned, side eye.
Back to Port of Spain, where Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has responded to criticisms from the opposition about the government's plans to revitalize the city of Port of Spain, in particular, comments made by the opposition leader.
I want to say that the government is only developing one set of people in the country. And let me say that this evening to Mrs. Masad Bissessa, time to stop that dog whistle foolishness of race and division in Trinidad and Tobago.
The Prime Minister was speaking earlier this afternoon at the opening of the Diego Martin South Community Centre. He then had some advice for people living in East Port of Spain.
And all those who know of a method of making omelette without breaking the egg, let me know, please. Because the biggest conversation in some quarters from some moronic expression is to tell Port of Spainese people the government coming to move all year. Well, Port of Spain people, East Port of Spain people, please move if the government coming to move you. Because if you don't move, that means you'll stay in this squalor for another 40 years. You might like that, but your children wouldn't like it. And I say the same thing to Sea-Lots. If this PNM government come to tell you move, it's because we want to improve your condition and to make the best of the location that you now occupy.
Dr. Rowley also took issue with the actions of one member of Parliament who he accused of playing politics.
I was amazed to see a member of Parliament with a social survey report and trying to use that as a political battering ram to tell people who are to benefit, people who are earmarked to benefit from the findings of the social survey, that this is a document that comes in a mailbox to say that government coming to take your land.
Also the announcement that West Trinidad will soon have a borough.
The corporation has already agreed and has advanced to the cabinet that it wants Diego Martin to become the next borough in the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. We have received your recommendations and steps are being taken to accept it. So in 2021, there are to be 2 new boroughs in Trinidad. You'll have the borough of Diego Martin and the borough of Siparia.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.